So I opened up the J20 and Meshview, and you can see it's shiny, shiny, shiny. So what I'm going to do is each one of these materials, you'll see techniques missing or wrong. And to find the technique, you can oftentimes look for what's red under the specular LUT, and it'll show you where that bit is. So being that those are all parts of the body, these should, and you'll notice this here, this technique, ENV map, color map gloss, that's why it's so freaking shiny. So what we'll do is we'll edit that, and all I'm going to do is say, fuck you ENV map, go away, apply. And now when you select the whole thing, it's going to have its normal color map gloss feature. All the bits and pieces that don't have techniques, generally, as long as it's, you have to be careful because, like, for instance, these may be decals, which they likely are, and it's a warning decal. So you see an alpha test, it's probably maybe a decal. The technique, I don't believe is going to make a difference, but you should have something other than nothing. So color map. It can be color map or color map gloss, depending. I think gloss is fine for a decal, but and then take a look at it and make sure it looks okay. And it does. Well, it actually looks nice and crisp. So looking at these are decals as well. You highlight these and you can see it again. So we'll give them a color map gloss as well to match the aircraft. And boom, that's fine. But basically you would want to go through each one of these and just verify what's what. So those are going to be shiny because it's got ENV map, color map gloss. Change it back. And if you don't want any shine, you just put color map. But in most cases you want a little reflectivity. So, and there's that. So I'm looking for this one there. Yeah, and there's another piece is the other side of the wing, which needs the same thing. What's this? Ah, that's the strut actuator or whatever. And that one should be color map gloss the same. Doesn't have anything. You can also add, if you create bump maps for these ones that don't have them, you can also create bump maps for them. Add the line, move this line here down a level, and then put your bump map in gear underscore B or such and such, and put it in texture 2, and point it to the new bump map you placed. You can add that as well. But all right, gloss. Whoops. So there we go. That's our gear. As far as I know, case doesn't matter. I haven't noticed any problems with it. So, all right. So there's cockpit. Cockpit instrument panels are fine. Just stay away from the glass. You want to watch. You don't want to mess with that too much. But color. Ah, fuck me. I can't type worth of shit. There. So now it's got an appropriate material or shader technique. Now it looks like it matches. Well, moving on. Jesus, there's a lot of parts to this one. Ugh. apparently the seat. The reflection is very subtle with the color matte gloss, so you can generally get away with it on almost all the parts, unless it's a specific thing that you want to keep extremely shiny. Holy mackerel. What the detail in this freaking model. Is that the freaking stick? Yep. Amazing. And the problem is, once you get done with one holiday, you're going to have to do it with all of them. So if they're modeled like this fucker where there's a million pieces, you got a lot of work ahead of you. Most aren't quite so broke up like this, but yeah, that's good. I don't know what that is. I can't even find that part. Instruments. There it is. Yep. Same thing. Let's see here. Where is this? Ah, and there's our shiny wings that we were looking for earlier. You see how reflective that is. Just go in, edit, get rid of it. Just leave color map gloss and bang. And now the wing is like the rest of the plane as it should be. I use that specular LUT to try to find where it's red to find out what part that part is. Ah, there it is. It's on the freaking landing gear. Ridiculous amount of detail on this. And that's going to get edited. Color map gloss. If you're smart, you probably just copy that. That way you can paste them in the ones that are missing faster. Another ENB map, color map gloss. God knows where it is. There it is. Oh, wings are separate. Huh. There's that. Wingtips. Nothing there. Paste it. There we go. Wingtips are done. There's the gear. So it's got nothing. Just getting the color map gloss. When you see an alpha blend for the cockpit or ENV alpha map, that's the cockpit glass. You want to be careful with that. I wouldn't mess with it much. But other than that, the rest of the parts, the only other thing I can think of that you need to be concerned with at all would be decals, but they seem to take color map gloss just fine. So you just check them as you do them, make sure they're okay. But every other bit really ought to be at least color map gloss. So like this one has no technique. You're looking at technique, that's the shader that it's using, which is what we're modifying here. Okay. What is that? That's instrument panel. Again. Paste. Done. Side panels. Cockpit still. You'll notice transparency gives you a clue. If there's something weird in there, just make sure you double check what you're changing so that you don't, apply a shader that might not work for it. There's that. That's gear. Gear gets it. I don't know where that is. Ah, it's in the instrument panel. No. Yep. You gotta be kidding me, that little bit. Ridiculous. Yep. Okay. Another bit. Computer screen. Should be about the same. See, now the computer screen you could probably put in the MV map, but if the light in the cockpit reflects on it, it's going to reflect really bright. I'd still just go with color map gloss. Only because I would assume they'd have an anti-reflective material on that so that the pilot doesn't get blinded when he's flying. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do in there, but alright, now we have glass, cockpit glass. Alpha blind, alpha ENV map is usually what it should be. If you have trouble with the textures, you can adjust the alphas on them to get them so that the clarity of the glass, maintaining still color, is enough to where you can see out of it well. But that's mostly in the texture, as long as these two are being used. So there's your canopy, and then I don't know what this one is. I'm not sure why that canopy looks funny on that side. It looks like the tangents are messed up on it. So you'll see some of this cockpit glass is like really funky in the Meshview, that white, and I think it's because of the smoothing groups it was exported with. But before I try fixing that, I'll just get what I had to fix and leave it alone. I don't know where that glass is supposed to be. Unless they put something inside. Well, anyway, I'm going to leave that glass because I don't know where it is or what it is, so I'll just leave it original. So then you would do this repeat and rinse for all the LODs, as well as double check the geometry 2. Geometry 2 is usually pretty easy, but this one has no technique. It should still maintain a color map gloss. So that one's fixed. And also the same for this, just for continuation. Some stuff actually has a geometry. Some of it's just using the geometry 1 for the cockpit. A lot of times that's, I believe, called in the tweak file or something, where it says use cockpit sub geometry 1 or something like that. But either way, for completeness, do that. So now I gotta go through every one of these LODs. So once you're done, you just save it, and then repack it up in game and check it out, make sure it's all right. Real quick though, for the cockpit glass, if you find something that's like kind of fucked up like this one is on the one side, sometimes that's tangents on the polys. This does have a tool to fix it, but I would suggest changing all the techniques first before you bother, so you don't save a screw up, because sometimes when it fixes it, it actually makes it worse, and sometimes when it fixes it, it makes it better. So sometimes it's better to leave it alone, and you don't want to change it and save it before you finish all the other and save it so that you don't have to worry about going back, right? So, here we go again. Let's see what do we got here. Yep, this is all the same. So, basically all these are getting color map gloss with the exception of the glass. I hate it when it does that. Again, most of these aren't modeled like this to this degree. It's just this guy did a fucking hell of a job on this one. Holy macaroni. That one's been done. That one's right. It's funny, some of them it's like they did the right thing and then some of them they didn't. It's like on their export, they failed to do it on some of the materials for whatever reason. And then they never went back in Meshview or anything to fix it after they exported. Oh, it's working great. So, again, just to reiterate, you're going through looking for both the NV map, color map gloss, and changing it back to color map. And you're also looking for anything that doesn't have a technique at all and apply a proper technique to it. In most cases, it's going to be color map gloss as a baseline. If you got a really special piece of geometry, you could use, whatever's best suited to make it look the way it should. But outright, it's usually color map gloss is usually the basic. Unless it's a headlight lens or something special, you'll come across that could use the shinier or even a duller, like if you want something to have a really flat color to it. In a rare occasion, you would just use color map rather than color map gloss. And then that has absolutely no reflectivity. So I'm going to pause the video here. Actually, I don't think I can. Oh well. Fucking. What is this? Yeah, there's only one glass on this one. Weird. Is that it? That's the computer. It's really weird. I don't know why Geometry 1 or LOD 0 had that, but Just didn't. Okay. So now we're on this one. Back through. That one's correct. Eight, 10, pain in the ass. Wish it was a quicker way, but you can't. The last one's glass, which we shouldn't need to fuck with. Okay. And now the last freaking LOD. Ooh. Unfortunate thing is, even though we're not using LODs, according to our code, I think it still does. Based on what the vehicle's calling out to do. It may yet still use that shader that's applied on those LODs at that distance. So it's best to do them all. That way it's consistent. Otherwise, if it does transition, you're going to notice it change pretty dramatically compared to the original LOD that you fix. So most of them wouldn't have this many fucking individual components. Also, one other thing to note, that ENV map shader uses quite a bit of resources. So if nothing else, this may help improve performance as well on as many vehicles as we can fix. It's a reason that SatNav, when he did a knife that had like a ENV map chrome type look to it and it shines. When you do that, it utilizes quite a bit of resources. Small knife doesn't add up, but when you've got multiple vehicles that might be using the wrong techniques, it can definitely add up. I didn't even think about that till just now. So I remember people bitching it would slow their game to a crawl, you know. So maybe doing this will actually improve frame rate too. Okay, so we've done all that. I'm going to save this file as it is before I try anything else. And then just on the side note, like I was saying about Geometry 1's cockpit, what we may be able to do to get that to be a little better is when we select our material glass and look at fixed tangents. See how it fixed that glass? But it only fixes what it can. I mean, if the base model, the cockpit's geometry wasn't modeled quite right, it's not going to be able to fix it all. And it may get a little bit distorted. So in some cases it might improve it. In some cases it might make it worse. But I think in game that little bit may not show too bad. But we'll have to live with it on some of them. But that's just a side note. If you have a problem with the glass on it or something like that, I don't know. You can always try to, that fixed tangents often will do it. Another thing you can do too, if you've got a stubborn mesh with a problem in the polys or something like that, there's also a fix mesh command. And like I said, in some cases it can break it, in some cases it makes it better. So I'm not sure what it's going to do on this one, so that's why I'm experimenting now after I save my other stuff. Fix mesh. And it'll sit and think for a minute, especially if it's a big model like this. But it's supposed to find bad polys and remove them. And this is a big one. Oh, and then a little important note too, as far as shader techniques and transparencies. Alpha blend is typically for cockpit glass. Alpha test is more for decals, for the transparencies. And it's using obviously the alpha channel, but it's using it in a different technique where it makes certain parts completely invisible on one and then on the other. And see, it found a ton of different duplicate faces and stuff like that, which is going to do nothing but just hopefully, make the model a little bit less resource intensive. If it's got crap in there that's doubled, there's no need for it because it's not being used really. It's just existing in there. But back to the shader techniques. Each shader technique has its own classification of how it actually takes your texture and it creates a certain shine or reflectivity or specular color of some sort or whatever, how it uses the textures, and the shader actually does its job. So with that said, now I'm liking the way that looks. Cockpit glass on all these things are kind of rough, so I'm thinking that's going to be okay. If not anything, it should be better than what it was. It's hard to get inside to look from the inside out, but you could see how it wasn't quite modeled right on the cockpit. But at least now, when it reflects, it's not too bad. And if you turn the alpha up on it, or down, I'm sorry, more to black, and make it more clear, so less color shows up, oftentimes that reflectivity will drop and you won't notice those little glitches and imperfections as much. Which I'd done that on a couple of them that were a little like that. But anyways, I'm going to save that and hopefully it'll be fine. Okay, and that's that. And then, like, again, if you want to change anything to where you want to add bump maps, for instance, this one isn't even using, I don't even think it has any bump maps, which is definitely kind of a loss on it. It's got maybe one or two. But you can also include bump maps and then add the lines in there. You just got to make sure that when you do, say for instance, this material here, no, that one's got one. So say this one doesn't have one for the seat. You just go in, make your texture, call it eject seat underscore B or something like that. You'd move the texture 2 line for the common LUT down into the texture 3 line, and then create a line calling to that bump map. Click apply and save, and it will load that bump map with that particular setup. So anyway, that's that.